The British came to India in 1600 as traders in the form of East India Company, which had the exclusive right of trading in India under a charter granted by Queen Elizabeth. In 1765, the company, which till now had purely trading function, obtained Diwani, that is right over revenue and civil justice of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa. This started its career as a territorial power. In 1858, in the wake of the Sipahi Mutiny, the British Crown assumed direct responsibility for the governance of India. This rule continued until India was granted independence on August 15, 1947. With the independence came the need for a constitution, hence, a constituent assembly was formed for this purpose in 1946, and on January 26, 1950, the constitution came into being. However, various features of the Indian constitution and polity have their roots in the British rule. There were certain events in the British rule that led down the legal framework for the organization and functioning of the government and administration in British India. These events have greatly influenced our constitution and polity. They are explained here in a chronological order under two major headings: the Company Rule 1773 to 1858 and the Crown Rule 1858 to 1947. The Company Rule 1773 to 1858, Regulating Act of 1773. This act was of great constitutional importance as it was the first step taken by the British government to control and regulate the affairs of the East India Company in India, and it recognized for the first time the political and administrative functions of the company, and it laid the foundations of central administration in India. The features of this act were as follows: it designated the Governor of Bengal as the Governor General of Bengal and created an executive council of 4 members to assist him. The first such Governor General was Lord Warren Hastings. It made the governors of Bombay and Madras presidencies subordinate to the Governor General of Bengal, unlike earlier when 3 presidencies were independent of one another. It provided for the establishment of a Supreme Court at Calcutta in 1774, comprising 1 Chief Justice and 3 other judges. It prohibited the servants of the company from engaging in any private trade or accepting presents or bribes from the natives. It strengthened the control of the British government over the company by requiring the Code of Directors, governing body of the company, to report on its revenue, civil and military affairs in India. Amendment Act of 1781. In a bid to rectify the defects of the Regulating Act of 1773, the British Parliament passed the Amendment Act of 1781, also known as the Act of Settlement. The features of this act were as follows: it exempted the Governor General and the Council from the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court for the acts done by them in their official capacity. Similarly, it also exempted the servants of the company from the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court for their official actions. It excluded the revenue matters and the matters arising in the collection of revenue from the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. It provided that the Supreme Court was to have jurisdiction over all inhabitants of Kolkata. It also required the court to administer the personal law of the defendants, that is, Hindus were to be tried according to the Hindu law and the Muslims were to be tried according to the Mohammedan law. It laid down the appeals from the provincial court could be taken to the Governor General in Council and not to the Supreme Court. It empowered the Governor General in Council to frame regulations for the provincial court and councils. Pitt's India Act of 1784. The next important act was the Pitt's India Act of 1784. The features of this act were as follows. It distinguished between the commercial and political functions of the company. It allowed the Board of Directors to manage the commercial affairs but created a new body called Board of Control to manage the political affairs. Thus, it established a system of double government. It empowered the Board of Control to supervise and direct all operations of the civil and military government or revenues of the British possessions in India. The act was significant for two reasons. First, the company's territories in India were for the first time called the British possessions in India, and the second, the British government was given supreme control over companies' affairs and its administrations in India. Act of 1786. In 1786, Lord Cornwallis was appointed as the Governor General of Bengal. He placed two demands to accept the post. He should be given power to override the decision of his council in special cases. He would be the commander in chief. Accordingly, the Act of 1786 was enacted to make both the provisions.